In the neon blaze of Las Vegas, inside the glimmering Legends Arena, two of Hollywood's biggest egos were about to collide with reality itself. What began as a red carpet spectacle of fame and nostalgia turned tense when Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal, the quiet storm of real combat mastery, took their seats in silence. Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't your average actor turned icon. For over 5 decades, he dominated bodybuilding, film, and politics. And Sylvester Stallone wasn't your typical guest of honor. For half a century, he'd been the face of cinematic grit, a screen warrior who turned pain into box office gold. But when Arnold and Sylvester mocked the old-school martial artists in front of a roaring crowd, they unknowingly invited the kind of fight that couldn't be directed, edited, or faked. The moment Norris rose from his chair and Seagal followed without a word, the atmosphere shifted. Cameras rolled. But what came next wasn't performance. It was precision, philosophy, and punishment, disguised as mercy. What began as an opening night stunt would become a spiritual reckoning, a collision between ego and mastery, illusion and reality. And when the night was over, the Legends Arena would never be the same because, for the first time, the world saw what happens when Hollywood's strongest step into the light of real strength. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Las Vegas night sky blazed with spotlights that carved white columns through darkness, all converging on the gleaming new Legends Arena. Its modern glass facade reflected the neon glow of the Strip while inside. Red velvet and polished steel created an atmosphere, half Hollywood premiere, half gladiatorial coliseum. Dana Voss stood at the center of it all, surveying her creation with sharp eyes that missed nothing. 5 minutes to the welcome speech, her assistant whispered, sliding past with an electronic tablet. Dana nodded, straightening the lapels of her tailored suit. At 45, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had built an empire from scratch. The Legends Arena was her magnum opus, a place where combat sports and entertainment would collide in a spectacle unlike anything Vegas had seen before. "How's attendance?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Every seat had been sold within hours of announcing tonight's star-studded opening. "Standing room only. We're turning people away." Dana allowed herself a momentary smile before her professional mask slipped back into place. Success wasn't measured in ticket sales. It was measured in moments that people couldn't forget. Tonight needed to be unforgettable. The VIP section hummed with activity as celebrities arrived in waves, each entrance triggering camera flashes and murmurs. Dana watched them with practiced disinterest until a distinctive laugh cut through the ambient noise. Deep, confident, unmistakable. Arnold Schwarzenegger had arrived. The former governor of California moved through the crowd with the easy charisma of someone accustomed to being the gravitational center of any room. At 77, his frame remained imposing, not the chiseled perfection of his bodybuilding days, but still carrying the aura of physical power. Beside him walked Sylvester Stallone, compact and serious-eyed at 78, his weathered face breaking into a reluctant smile as Arnold clapped a massive hand on his shoulder. "Look at this place, Sly!" Arnold's voice boomed, his accent as thick and distinctive as ever. "Like the Roman Colosseum, but with better lighting, Ja?" Stallone nodded, his eyes tracking the architecture with the intensity of someone who notices details others miss. "Not bad," he admitted, which from him was high praise. Dana approached, extending her hand. "Governor, Mr. Stallone, thank you both for coming. This means everything to the launch." Arnold engulfed her hand in his. "Dana, the woman of the hour, you've built something spectacular here." "Impressive," Stallone added, his handshake firm but briefer. "Your seats are front row center. Dana said, gesturing toward the specialized combat arena that dominated the main hall. Unlike a traditional boxing ring or MMA octagon, the Legends Arena featured a circular platform with specialized matting designed for exhibitions rather than regulation fights. We've got quite a show planned. I expect nothing less, Arnold said, then lowered his voice conspiratorially. But the real show is always the people. Isn't it? Who else is coming tonight? Dana smiled professionally. A list only. We've got... Her words faltered as she noticed a subtle shift in the room's energy. Near the east entrance, without fanfare or entourage, Chuck Norris had entered. At 84, he moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had never wasted motion. His beard, once red, now silver-white, framed a face that revealed little. Beside him walked Seagal, 63. His black outfit and slicked-back ponytail, creating the impression of a man outside of time. Unlike the wave of attention that had followed Arnold and Stallone, Norris and Seagal seemed to create a pocket of stillness around them. No loud greetings. No performative displays of camaraderie. They acknowledged those who approached with respectful nods, but kept moving toward their designated seats. Arnold said, following Dana's gaze, "The competition has arrived." Dana turned back to him, her expression carefully neutral. "Competition?" Arnold laughed. "Come on, Dana. 2 generations of action stars under one roof? Everyone's thinking it. We're just here to support the opening," Stallone said. But his eyes had narrowed slightly as he watched Norris and Seagal take their seats. Dana felt the first flicker of unease. She had invited these 4 legends deliberately, hoping for good publicity and perhaps some friendly reminiscence about the golden era of action films. But the undercurrent of tension in Arnold's voice suggested something else entirely. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me," she said smoothly. "I need to prepare for the welcome. Please enjoy the reception." As she walked away, she heard Arnold's voice again, louder this time, clearly meant to carry. "You know, Sly, between the 2 of us, we've killed more bad guys on screen than anyone in history." Stallone's reply was too quiet to make out, but Dana didn't need to hear it. The seed had been planted. The ceremonial gong rang, signaling 10 minutes until the official opening ceremony. Guests began making their way to their seats as Dana took position behind the stage curtain. From here, she could see Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal sitting in their front row positions, speaking quietly to each other. Chuck sat with perfect posture, hands resting lightly on his knees. Nothing in his demeanor suggested a man in his 80s. The discipline that had defined his life seemed to have preserved something essential in him. Beside him, Seagal maintained a similar stillness, though his was more impenetrable, less approachable. They weren't performing, Dana realized. They were simply present. Across the arena, Arnold and Stallone had attracted a cluster of admirers. Arnold was telling a story, his hands gesturing expansively, his face animated. Every few seconds, he would flex subtly, an unconscious habit from decades of showcasing his physique. Stallone leaned against the barrier, his signature half-smile appearing whenever the crowd laughed, but his eyes repeatedly drifted toward Norris and Seagal. 2 different worlds, Dana thought. 2 different understandings of what it meant to be strong. The house lights dimmed, and Dana stepped out to thunderous applause. Camera flashes created a sea of light as she approached the microphone at center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice filling the arena. "Welcome to the grand opening of Legends Arena." The crowd roared its approval, the sound washing over her like a physical force. "Tonight marks the beginning of a new era in entertainment, a place where the greatest warriors from every discipline can showcase their skills. a monument to strength, dedication, and the indomitable human spirit. She gestured to the arena around them. This isn't just another venue. This is a place where legends are celebrated and new legends are born. The spotlight shifted, illuminating the VIP section. And speaking of legends, we are honored to have with us tonight 4 icons who defined an era of action cinema. The crowd's anticipation was palpable as the camera panned across the 4 men. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Chuck Norris, Steven Seagal. The audience erupted, smartphones lifting everywhere to capture the moment. On the massive screens above, the camera toggled between close-ups of each man's face. Arnold beamed and waved both hands. Stallone nodded appreciatively, raising a fist in his iconic Rocky pose. Norris smiled politely, inclining his head. Seagal remained inscrutable, acknowledging the moment with only the slightest nod. These men didn't just entertain us, Dana continued. They inspired us. They showed us different paths to strength, different definitions of power. The crowd settled as she continued her prepared remarks about the arena's future events and vision. But something had changed in the atmosphere. She could feel it as she spoke. The subtle electricity of rivalry, the unspoken question that seemed to vibrate in the air. Who among these icons was truly the strongest? As she concluded her speech and the scheduled exhibition fights began, Dana watched from the sidelines. The demonstration bouts were impressive Olympic wrestlers, MMA champions, championship boxers, each showcasing the best of their discipline. But she noticed that many eyes in the audience kept drifting back to the 4 legends in the VIP section. Between bouts, she made her way to Arnold and Stallone. "Are you gentlemen enjoying the show?" "Fantastic production value," Stallone said, his filmmaker's eye evident. Arnold nodded enthusiastically. "Great fighters, great energy. But you know what would bring down the house?" He leaned closer. "Something unscripted. Something real." Dana's professional smile didn't waver, though alarm bells rang in her head. "Everything tonight is carefully choreographed, Governor. That's how we ensure safety and quality." "Of course. Of course," Arnold said, waving away her concern. "But the best moments in life aren't scripted. They're spontaneous." He glanced meaningfully toward Norris and Seagal. "I'm just saying people would remember it forever." Before Dana could respond, thunderous applause signaled the end of another exhibition. The arena lights brightened slightly for the intermission. Arnold stood suddenly, his imposing figure drawing all eyes. "I think I'll stretch my legs," he announced. "Maybe say hello to some old colleagues." Dana watched, unable to intervene without creating a scene, as Arnold made his way around the arena perimeter toward Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal. Stallone hesitated a moment, then followed, caught between reluctance and loyalty. As they approached, Norris rose to greet them, his movements fluid and economical. Seagal remained seated, observing with hooded eyes. "Chuck!" "Steven?" Arnold's voice carried across the arena. "Like old times, eh? The 4 horsemen of action cinema?" Cameras swiveled instantly, capturing the moment. Dana held her breath, watching as the first tendrils of what would become a storm began to form. In the artificial light of the arena, surrounded by the murmur of thousands, 4 legends stood face to face, 2 buoyed by charisma and showmanship, 2 grounded in silent discipline. The collision was minutes away. The intermission music faded, replaced by the ambient hum of conversation. Near the front row, 4 action icons stood in a loose circle, their meeting drawing smartphone cameras like moths to flame. Dana Voss moved quickly through the crowd, smiling professionally at guests while her mind calculated damage control scenarios. "You both look good," Arnold was saying as she approached, his voice pitched to carry. Still training, Chuck? Steven? Chuck Norris nodded, a slight smile softening his weathered features. Every day. Never stopped. Discipline is a way of life, not a temporary state, Seagal added, his first words of the evening carrying a weight that silenced nearby conversations. Same here, Arnold said, patting his substantial chest. Different, but same. The body is a temple. Ja? Stallone stood slightly apart, hands in pockets, watching the interaction with guarded eyes. Dana recognized his expression. The calculating gaze of someone scripting dialogue in real time, assessing the scene's potential before committing. Your exhibition fights are impressive, Norris said to Dana, courteous but direct. Real skill on display. Thank you, she replied. We wanted authenticity above all else. These are genuine masters of their disciplines. Authentic, yes, Arnold interjected. But also safe? Contained? His smile widened as heads turned throughout the nearby sections, conversations quieting as people sensed something unfolding. Sometimes I wonder what audiences would pay to see something truly unexpected. Dana stepped forward. Governor? But Arnold was already in motion, years of commanding rooms guiding him naturally to the nearest microphone stand. A technician, mistaking him for a planned speaker, activated it with a nod. The sound system crackled to life, and Arnold's voice boomed across the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, what a night, huh? The crowd roared in response, the energy shifting instantly. Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't just a star, he was a force of nature, capable of bending rooms to his will through sheer charisma. I was just having an interesting conversation with my good friends here. He gestured expansively towards Stallone, Norris, and Seagal. And I had a thought. A crazy, spontaneous thought. Dana moved toward the sound booth, signaling frantically. But it was too late. The audience was already leaning forward in their seats, thousands of faces alight with anticipation. We have here two different generations of action heroes. Yes? Two different approaches. Arnold's grin widened. On one side, Sly and me, we built our careers on being larger than life. The muscles, the explosions, the one-liners. Ja? He flexed dramatically, drawing appreciative laughs. And on the other side, we have Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal, real martial artists who brought their skills to the screen. The crowd noise swelled as understanding dawned. Stallone had moved to Arnold's side, his expression unreadable. Norris and Seagal remained where they stood, watching with calm intensity. So, I'm thinking, what if we give these good people something special? A once-in-a-lifetime exhibition? Arnold's voice dropped theatrically. Hollywood versus reality. Movie stars versus true fighters. Just a friendly demonstration, of course. The arena erupted. Phones lifted everywhere, social media feeds flooding with real-time updates. Chants began in scattered sections. Do it! Do it! Quickly spreading until they merged into a deafening roar. Dana reached the sound technician, who reluctantly cut Arnold's microphone at her insistence. But the damage was done. The arena had transformed from organized showcase to chaotic energy, all centered on the four legends now spotlighted on the main screens. Are you insane? She hissed, reaching Arnold's side. This isn't what we planned. You can't just... I just did, Arnold replied, his smile never wavering. And look, they love it. Indeed, the crowd had worked itself into a frenzy. The chanting continued, punctuated by stomping feet and thunderous applause. The scheduled exhibition fighters stood awkwardly at the edges, forgotten in the face of this unexpected development. Stallone leaned in, his voice low enough that only Dana and Arnold could hear. "This is going too far. We're not fighters, Arnie." "Speak for yourself," Arnold countered. "I've been training for 50 years. Besides, it's just an exhibition, not a real fight. For entertainment." Dana turned desperately to Norris and Seagal, hoping for a voice of reason, but the expression on Chuck's face gave her pause. There was no anger there. No indignation at Arnold's presumption. Only a calm assessment, as if he were facing a puzzle that required solution rather than an insult that demanded response. "Mr. Norris," she began, "please understand this isn't sanctioned or prepared. We can't possibly—" "It's all right, Miss Voss," Chuck said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that silenced her immediately. "Some lessons can only be learned through experience." The cryptic response sent a chill through Dana. She turned to Seagal, whose impassive expression revealed nothing. "This is a mistake," she insisted. Seagal shrugged slightly. "Perhaps, but not ours to make or prevent." Dana's security team had formed a perimeter, unsure how to proceed. The scheduled program had effectively collapsed. The crowd's attention was fixed solely on the developing drama. Dana's phone buzzed continuously as executives and investors demanded updates. Arnold, ever the showman, had recovered another microphone. "What do you say, Chuck?" "Steven? Just a friendly exhibition. 4 legends, giving the fans something to remember. No egos, no winners or losers, just a demonstration of different styles." The arena fell silent as all eyes turned to Norris. At 84, his posture remained perfect, his movements deliberate as he stepped forward. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured but carried effortlessly. "Fighting for entertainment isn't fighting at all, it's performance." He paused, eyes moving from Arnold to the audience and back. "But sometimes, performance reveals truth. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now, back to the story. The crowd erupted again, interpreting his words as acceptance. Seagal moved to Chuck's side, his expression still unreadable but his presence solid, immovable. Stallone gripped Arnold's arm. "Think about what you're doing," he murmured. "These aren't actors. They're the real thing." Something flashed in Arnold's eyes, a fleeting uncertainty, quickly replaced by stubborn pride. "So are we, Sly. We've trained with the best. We've done our own stunts. We've pushed our bodies beyond what anyone thought possible." "For cameras," Stallone insisted. "With choreography and safety teams and second takes." But Arnold had already turned back to the crowd, arms raised in triumph. "Tomorrow night," he announced. "Right here. A special exhibition match, Schwarzenegger and Stallone versus Norris and Seagal." Dana closed her eyes briefly, years of careful planning collapsing around her. When she opened them again, she found Chuck Norris watching her with something like compassion. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "This isn't what I intended." "Few battles ever are," he replied. Then turned to leave, Seagal following silently in his wake. As the news rippled through the arena and out into the waiting world, Dana felt the weight of inevitability settle over her. Social media exploded, news crews abandoned their scheduled stories, and ticket scalpers began charging 10 times face value for the following night. What had begun as a sophisticated arena opening had morphed into a circus, but one that would break every attendance record in Vegas history. Arnold worked the crowd masterfully, his booming laugh and expansive gestures transforming the impending exhibition into the most anticipated event of the year. But as Dana watched Stallone's troubled expression and the quiet departure of Norris and Seagal, she recognized the brewing storm. This wasn't just about entertainment anymore. It had become something far more primal, a collision of philosophies, a test of authenticity. The question wasn't whether the exhibition would proceed. That momentum was now unstoppable. The question was, what would remain when the dust settled? In the arena's back corridors, away from cameras and chanting crowds, Stallone caught up to Norris and Seagal. "Chuck! Stephen, wait!" he called, his voice echoing off concrete walls. They stopped, turning with synchronized precision that spoke of thousands of hours of training. "This isn't my idea," Stallone said, hands spread. "You know Arnold. Once he gets something in his head." "We know," Chuck replied simply. Stallone ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "Look, we can find a way to control this. Make it safe. Choreographed. No one needs to get embarrassed." Steven Seagal's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that what concerns you, Sylvester? Embarrassment?" The blunt question hung in the air. Stallone, master of the underdog narrative, suddenly found himself speechless. Chuck placed a hand on his shoulder. "Pride goes before destruction, Sly. Not my words." Proverbs 16:18. His eyes were kind but unflinching. "Question is, whose pride are we talking about?" He squeezed once, then released, continuing down the corridor with Seagal. Stallone watched them go, the uneasy feeling in his stomach growing. For the first time since Arnold had grabbed that microphone, Stallone confronted the truth he'd been avoiding. They had made a terrible mistake. As Dana attempted to restructure the remainder of the evening's program, her phone chimed with a news alert. She glanced down and froze. The headline already blared across every major outlet: "Showdown in Vegas. Action icons Khalid, Schwarzenegger, and Stallone challenged Norris and Seagal." Beneath it, a sub-headline completed her dismay. "Hollywood legends claim movie training equals real fighting skills." The gauntlet hadn't just been thrown. It had been broadcast to the entire world. Morning light spilled through the curtains of Dana Voss's office, illuminating floating dust motes and the chaos of scattered papers across her desk. She hadn't left the arena all night. The previous evening's impromptu challenge had unleashed a tsunami of logistics, legal concerns, and media requests that demanded immediate attention. Her office door burst open as Ryan, her head of security, entered without knocking. "Ticket system crashed," he announced, dropping into the chair opposite her desk. "Too much volume. We're switching to a lottery system, or this place will collapse tomorrow night." Dana nodded wearily. "What about waivers? Insurance? Legal says we need all 4 participants to sign expanded forms, basically absolving us if they kill each other." He ran a hand over his close-cropped hair. "Which, by the way, is a real possibility." "They won't kill each other," Dana murmured, though uncertainty threaded through her voice. "It's an exhibition, for show." Ryan's skeptical expression said everything. "You saw Norris and Seagal last night. That wasn't for show energy." "Has anyone heard from them this morning?" "Nothing from Chuck or Steven. Schwarzenegger's people have called 6 times he wants pyrotechnics for his entrance." Dana closed her eyes, massaging her temples. "Of course he does." The phone on her desk rang the private line. She snatched it up. "Dana Voss. Miss Voss. This is Howard Klein, Mr. Stallone's personal assistant. Mr. Stallone would like to speak with you privately this morning, if possible." A flicker of hope. Perhaps Stallone would be the voice of reason, call off this circus before it went any further. "Tell him I'll meet him wherever is convenient." 30 minutes later, Dana sat in a private dining room at the Bellagio, waiting as Sylvester Stallone meticulously added sweetener to his coffee. The actor looked tired, the lines in his face deeper than they had appeared the night before. "Thank you for meeting me," he said finally. "Of course. I'm hoping we can find a way to diffuse this situation." Stallone stirred his coffee slowly, weighing his words. Arnold's not going to back down. You know that, right? He's many things, but never a quitter. Even when quitting is the sensible option? A thin smile crossed Stallone's face. Especially then. Dana leaned forward. Mr. Stallone. Sly. This exhibition is a powder keg. Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal aren't performers pretending to be fighters. They're legitimate martial artists who happen to become actors. There's a world of difference. You think I don't know that? Stallone's voice had an edge now. I've worked with real fighters all my life. I know the difference between movie fighting and the real thing. Then why go through with this? Stallone looked away, his gaze settling on the Las Vegas skyline, visible through the window. You ever stand at the edge of a cliff, knowing you shouldn't jump, but feeling pulled toward the edge anyway? Dana waited, sensing there was more. Arnold and I, he continued, we've spent our lives being larger than life, creating these icons, these impossible versions of strength. He sipped his coffee. After a while, the line blurs. You start believing your own myth. And this exhibition will clarify that line? Stallone's smile was sad now. At my age, clarity comes at a premium. He straightened, shoulders squaring. I'm not here to cancel. I'm here to ask for ground rules, parameters that keep this from becoming a bloodbath. Dana's heart sank. She had hoped for an ally in dismantling the event, not in structuring it. What did you have in mind? 3 rounds. 2 minutes each. Light contact only. No strikes to the head for those of us over 70. He delivered the last line with self-deprecating humor that didn't reach his eyes. More demonstration than competition. And you think Norris and Seagal will agree to this? They're professionals. If we approach with respect rather than bravado, they'll meet us halfway. Dana wasn't convinced, but it was better than nothing. I'll draw up the proposal. But Sly, she met his gaze directly. Be careful. This isn't Rocky VI. There's no script ensuring the underdog triumphs. Something flashed across his eyes, a moment of clarity. Perhaps. Or resignation. There never really was, he said quietly. Across town, in a private dojo tucked behind an unassuming storefront, Chuck Norris completed his morning kata. At 84, his movements remained precise, each position flowing into the next with the harmony of decades of practice. Nearby, Steven Seagal sat in meditation, his breathing regulated and deep. Chuck finished the sequence and bowed toward the simple shrine at the front of the room. Only then did he acknowledge their visitor. Mr. Klein, he said, reaching for a towel. What brings Stallone's assistant to our door? Howard Klein stood awkwardly at the entrance, clearly uncomfortable in the austere training space. Mr. Norris? Mr. Seagal, I've brought a proposal regarding tonight's exhibition. From Stallone or Schwarzenegger? Chuck asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. From Mr. Stallone. He's suggesting some parameters to ensure the event remains controlled. Seagal opened his eyes, his meditation apparently complete. Let me guess. He wants to turn it into a performance. Klein shifted his weight. He wants to ensure no one gets hurt unnecessarily. Chuck accepted the envelope Klein extended, opening it carefully. His eyes scanned the proposed rules: limited rounds, restricted target areas, protective equipment. Tell Mr. Stallone we appreciate his concerns, Chuck said, refolding the paper. But parameters won't be necessary. Klein blinked. Excuse me? We won't be throwing dangerous strikes or attempting to injure anyone, Chuck explained calmly. That's never been our approach. Control comes from within, not from external rules. But Mr. Schwarzenegger is expecting what Arnold expects, and what will occur may differ. Seagal interjected, rising fluidly despite his bulk. That is often the first lesson. Klein looked between them, clearly at a loss. So, you're refusing the terms. We're suggesting they're unnecessary. Chuck corrected gently. True martial arts isn't about inflicting damage. It's about achieving harmony, even in conflict. Klein nodded uncertainly, backing toward the door. I'll convey your message. When he had gone, Seagal turned to Chuck. They still don't understand. No, Chuck agreed. But understanding rarely precedes experience. Meanwhile, in a state-of-the-art gym reserved exclusively for his use, Arnold Schwarzenegger powered through a punishing workout. Despite his age, his strength remained remarkable, a testament to the iron discipline that had defined his bodybuilding career. Sweat poured down his face as he completed another set of weighted punches, the resistance bands snapping taut with each extension. Harder, he commanded his trainer, a former heavyweight boxer who knew better than to argue. More resistance. The trainer adjusted the equipment wordlessly, exchanging a concerned glance with Arnold's physician, who monitored the session from nearby. Governor, perhaps we should consider a cool-down, the doctor suggested carefully. You've been at this for nearly 2 hours. No time for cool-down, Arnold replied between forceful exhalations. Tonight is about proving something. With all due respect, sir. Proving what? You're one of the most successful men alive. An icon in multiple fields. What could you possibly— That it was never just for show, Arnold interrupted, eyes fixed on his reflection in the mirror. That the strength was real, is real. The doctor fell silent, recognizing the futility of argument. In all his years treating celebrities, athletes, and politicians, he had never encountered willpower like Schwarzenegger's. The same force that had transformed an Austrian farm boy into Mr. Said, farewell for Olympia, then a Hollywood star, then a governor. Arnold completed the set with a roar of effort, then stood breathing heavily, studying his reflection. The body had changed with age, softened in places, thickened in others, but the framework of greatness remained visible beneath. When I came to America, he said suddenly, still addressing his reflection, they said my accent was too thick, my body too strange, my name unpronounceable. His eyes narrowed. I proved them wrong. Every time. Tonight will be no different. His phone buzzed. Klein, reporting on the meeting with Norris and Seagal. Arnold listened, his expression darkening. They refused the rules? Fine. Their mistake. He ended the call abruptly. No more resistance training. Get the sparring gear. His trainer exchanged another worried glance with the doctor. Sir, full contact sparring might not be advisable at this stage. Did I ask for advice? Arnold's voice had the edge that had made directors, political opponents, and business competitors tremble. Sparring gear. Now. As preparations intensified throughout the day, Dana found herself at the eye of a media hurricane. Every network had descended on Vegas, transforming the Legends Arena from a sophisticated venue into the epicenter of a global spectacle. Journalists crowded the lobby, security worked double shifts, and social media blazed with speculation, memes, and heated debates about the coming exhibition. By mid-afternoon, Dana received confirmation. The event had become the most talked about topic worldwide, surpassing elections, conflicts, and celebrity scandals. What had begun as an impulsive challenge had morphed into a cultural moment, a collision of eras, philosophies, and definitions of strength that resonated far beyond entertainment. As sunset approached, she stood in the now empty arena, visualizing the chaos that would soon fill it. Her phone rang again, this time Chuck Norris himself. "Miss Voss?" His calm voice was a stark contrast to the frenzy surrounding the event. "I wanted to check on you personally." The consideration caught her off guard. "I'm managing," she replied honestly. "I understand this isn't what you planned for your arena's debut." "That's putting it mildly." A gentle chuckle. "Life rarely follows our scripts. The question is how we adapt when the unexpected arrives." Dana found herself voicing the fear she'd kept professional hidden. People could get hurt tonight. Reputations damaged. Legacies tarnished. "Perhaps," Chuck acknowledged. "Or perhaps something valuable might be learned." "At what cost?" "Truth often carries a price," he said simply. "But its value exceeds the payment." After they disconnected, Dana stood alone in the vast space, his words echoing. Outside, the sun slipped below the horizon. In hotel rooms and private gyms across Las Vegas, 4 legends prepared for an encounter none of them had anticipated just 24 hours earlier. The collision was no longer approaching. It had arrived. 7 o'clock transformed the Legends Arena into something primal. Gone was the sophisticated ambiance of opening night, replaced by an electric atmosphere that crackled with anticipation. Every seat filled within minutes of the doors opening. Standing room sections overflowed. Fire marshals hovered nervously, calculating maximum occupancy limits against the crush of humanity that pressed inward from all sides. In the center, the exhibition platform had been modified larger now, with better lighting and specialized mats that offered protection without limiting movement. 4 entry points had been constructed, one at each compass point, each with its own distinct styling. Everything designed for maximum dramatic impact. Dana Voss stood in the production booth overlooking it all, barely recognizing her own creation. What had been conceived as an elegant showcase of martial disciplines had morphed into a modern gladiatorial spectacle. Camera crews from every major network jockeyed for position. Celebrities filled the front rows, smartphones ready to capture what many were already calling the fight of the century. 5 minutes to broadcast, the technical director announced. Entrances begin in 3. Dana nodded, adjusting her headset. Audio levels? Peaking. This crowd is off the charts. Indeed, the noise had become almost physical. A wall of sound composed of thousands of voices, all vibrating with the same fevered excitement. Dana had produced sporting events, concerts, even political rallies, but never had she felt energy like this. It pressed against the glass of the booth, demanding release. "Entrance 1 ready," came the call. Arnold in position. Dana steeled herself. "Begin the sequence." The arena lights dimmed dramatically, plunging the space into momentary darkness. The crowd's roar intensified, then shifted to a collective gasp as the first notes of "Welcome to the Jungle" blasted through the sound system. Spotlights slashed through the darkness, converging on the north entrance where pyrotechnics erupted in controlled bursts of flame. Arnold Schwarzenegger emerged through artificial smoke, arms raised triumphantly. At 77, dressed in a form-fitting athletic shirt that emphasized his still impressive physique, he commanded attention through sheer force of presence. The crowd exploded, chanting his name as he marched toward the platform with the confident stride that had carried him through countless action sequences. "Entrance 2 ready," the comm crackled. Stallone in position. The music shifted the unmistakable opening notes of Eye of the Tiger. The eastern entrance illuminated as Sylvester Stallone appeared, more subdued than his counterpart but no less magnetic. Where Arnold played to the crowd, Stallone seemed focused inward. His expression, one of contained intensity, as he approached the platform. The 2 actors met at center stage, clasping hands in a show of solidarity that triggered another wave of cheers. Arnold leaned in, saying something that made Stallone nod grimly. "Entrances 3 and 4 ready," the technical director announced. "Norris and Seagal, in position." Dana hesitated, suddenly aware of the contrast about to unfold. "Proceed." The music and pyrotechnics vanished abruptly. Silence descended, broken only by the confused murmur of the crowd. Then, without fanfare or announcement, the southern entrance quietly illuminated. Chuck Norris walked forward, dressed in a simple black G, with a red headband, an understated homage to his Walker Texas Ranger days. No musical accompaniment, no special effects. Just the measured stride of a man who had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of controlled movement. From the western entrance, Steven Seagal appeared simultaneously, his traditional Aikido hakama flowing with each step. Like Chuck, he moved without theatrics, his focus entirely internal. The crowd's reaction shifted uncertain at first, then building into a different kind of appreciation. Not the frenzied excitement that had greeted Arnold and Stallone, but a deeper, almost reverent recognition. Thousands of smartphones lifted higher, capturing the moment when showmanship met stoicism. The four men converged at the center of the platform. The contrast was immediate and stark. Arnold and Stallone actively projecting energy outward, playing to the cameras, while Chuck and Seagal remained contained, their presence defined by stillness rather than display. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, "welcome to the most unprecedented exhibition in combat sports history." The crowd roared its approval as the four icons stood face to face, the overhead cameras capturing every nuance of their confrontation for the massive screens above. In the north corner, the Austrian Oak, the Terminator. The 7-time Mr. Olympia, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold raised both arms, turning in a full circle to acknowledge the thunderous response. And his partner, the Italian Stallion, the writer and star of the Rocky and Rambo franchises, Sylvester Stallone. Stallone pumped a fist skyward, his face set in the determined expression that had become his trademark across 50 years of cinema. In the south corner, 8-time world karate champion, founder of the Chun Kuk Do martial arts system, and star of Walker Texas Ranger, Chuck Norris. Chuck nodded once, his expression serene despite the cacophony surrounding him, and his partner, 7th-degree black belt in Aikido, martial arts instructor to the stars, and action film icon Steven Seagal. Seagal remained motionless, acknowledging the introduction with only the slightest inclination of his head, as the rules were explained: 3 rounds, exhibition format. Points, rather than knockout. Dana watched the four men closely. Arnold's confidence seemed to radiate outward, his body language expansive and dominant. Beside him, Stallone's energy was more focused, his eyes constantly assessing, analyzing. But it was the contrasting stillness of Chuck and Seagal that drew her attention, the quiet certainty in their posture, the economy in their slightest movements. The referee called them to the center for final instructions. Arnold leaned forward, smiling broadly for the cameras. "Just like the old days, Ja. Predator versus Delta Force." Chuck's smile was polite, but reserved. "Movies aren't reality, Arnold. Neither is the dojo," Arnold countered. "No script tonight, my friend." "There's never been a script," Seagal said quietly. His first public words of the evening. "That's the point." The referee separated them, signaling for the exhibition to begin. The crowd hushed momentarily, collectively holding its breath as the four legends took their positions. Arnold and Stallone conferred briefly, then adopted fighting stances that any movie fan would recognize: dramatic, camera-ready poses designed to showcase physicality. Across from them, Chuck and Seagal settled into traditional postures, Chuck's hands raised in the distinctive guard position of his personal chun-cook-do system. Seagal's open palms extended in Aikido's receiving position. The contrast could not have been more pronounced. The bell rang. Arnold moved first, advancing with the confident swagger that had defined his on-screen persona. He launched a series of exaggerated punches, powerful but telegraphed, designed to look impressive rather than connect efficiently. Chuck didn't counterattack. He simply wasn't there when the punches arrived, his movements so subtle and economical that it almost appeared as though Arnold was missing stationary targets. No wasted motion, no dramatic evasion, just precise, minimal adjustments that left Arnold swinging at air. The crowd's reaction shifted from excitement to confusion. This wasn't the spectacular collision they had anticipated. Simultaneously, Stallone engaged with Seagal, attempting a combination of hooks and uppercuts that might have looked devastating with the right camera angle and editing. Seagal responded with Aikido's fundamental principle, blending with the attack rather than opposing it directly. He moved with Stallone's energy, redirecting rather than blocking, guiding rather than stopping. The result was surreal to watch Stallone throwing textbook cinematic punches, while Seagal seemed to flow around them like water around stone. "What's happening?" Dana heard a nearby spectator ask. "They're not even fighting back." Arnold, frustration building visibly, increased his pace. His movements grew less controlled, more desperate to make contact. Chuck continued to evade with minimal effort, never countering, never attacking, simply demonstrating the difference between performance and practice. The pattern continued for nearly a minute. Arnold and Stallone attacking with increasing intensity, Chuck and Seagal neutralizing every move without apparent effort. The crowd's confusion deepened, some beginning to boo at the lack of dramatic engagement, others watching in dawning appreciation of the lesson unfolding before them. Arnold, breathing heavily now, stepped back in frustration. "Is this what you call fighting?" he called loudly enough for the front rows to hear. "Running away?" Chuck's expression remained calm. "Conservation of energy is the first principle, Governor. Why expend force when none is required?" The response triggered scattered laughter, further agitating Arnold. He lunged forward again, this time with a haymaker that carried the full weight of his considerable frame. A blow that, had it connected, might have ended the exhibition then and there. Chuck sidestepped with such precision that Arnold's momentum carried him forward, off balance and vulnerable. For the first time, Chuck initiated contact, not a strike, but a gentle redirection that used Arnold's own force against him. The former governor staggered, nearly falling before catching himself against the ropes. The crowd gasped. Across the platform, Seagal had adopted a similar approach with Stallone, absorbing and redirecting each attack with fluid ease. Stallone, more observant than his partner, had already begun adapting his movements, growing more cautious, more measured, as understanding dawned in his eyes. The first round ended with a bell that seemed to startle everyone. Arnold returned to his corner, face flushed with exertion and something that looked like confusion. Stallone joined him, brow furrowed in concentration. "They're making fools of us," Arnold muttered, loud enough for nearby cameras to pick up. "No," Stallone replied thoughtfully. "They're teaching us." Across the platform, Chuck and Seagal stood in quiet conversation, neither winded nor concerned. Their stillness contrasted sharply with Arnold's agitated pacing and Stallone's intense focus. Dana leaned closer to her monitor, watching the shift in the arena's energy. What had begun as spectacle was transforming into something unexpected. A live demonstration of the difference between appearance and essence, between performing strength and embodying it. The bell for round 2 rang. This time, Stallone stepped forward first, his approach noticeably changed. Gone were the wide, cinematic punches, replaced by more compact, efficient movements. He had spent decades working with professional boxers for his Rocky films, and that genuine knowledge now surfaced as he engaged Seagal with greater respect and awareness. Seagal nodded slightly, acknowledging the adjustment. Their exchange became more fluid, more authentic, still an exhibition, but now infused with mutual recognition. When Seagal executed an Aikido technique that gently turned Stallone's force against him, the actor rolled with it skillfully, regaining his stance with newfound humility in his expression. Arnold, however, took a different lesson from the first round. His attacks against Chuck became more aggressive, more determined, as if he could overcome technique with sheer force of will. He unleashed a barrage of powerful strikes, each delivered with the full conviction of a man accustomed to bending the world to his vision. Chuck's response remained consistent: minimum force, maximum efficiency. He didn't block Arnold's attacks. He simply ensured they encountered nothing substantial. Like trying to punch a shadow, Arnold found himself growing increasingly exhausted, while his opponent remained fresh and centered. Halfway through the round, frustration overcame strategy. Arnold lunged forward with a roar, attempting to grapple Chuck directly. It was the first moment of genuine combat intent, crossing the line from exhibition to confrontation. Chuck's response was immediate but measured. As Arnold charged, Chuck executed a simple technique, redirecting Arnold's considerable momentum and allowing physics to complete what technique began. The former governor found himself suddenly airborne, then flat on his back on the mat, the impact driving the air from his lungs in an audible whoosh that the microphones captured perfectly. The arena fell silent. Chuck stood over Arnold, not in triumph but in readiness, prepared to offer assistance if accepted. For a long moment, Arnold remained down, stunned more by the effortlessness of his defeat than by the fall itself. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a tremor unfamiliar to those who knew him. "How? How did you do that?" Chuck extended a hand. 50 years of practice. Not 50 years of pretending. The words, delivered without malice, but with unflinching honesty, echoed across the hushed arena. Arnold hesitated, then accepted the offered hand, allowing Chuck to help him to his feet. Something shifted in that moment, not just in Arnold, but in the atmosphere of the entire event. The exhibition had transcended entertainment and become education. Thousands watched, phones forgotten in their hands, as ego confronted skill and found itself wanting. The remainder of the second round unfolded with a different energy. Stallone continued his more technical engagement with Seagal, each exchange revealing the actor's genuine respect for martial arts beneath his Hollywood persona. Arnold, still shaken, approached Chuck with newfound caution, his movements more controlled, if not more effective. By the final round, the exhibition had transformed entirely. What began as a spectacle had become a seminar for men at different points on the spectrum between performance and practice, between appearing strong and being strong. Arnold, his legendary confidence visibly diminished, now asked questions between exchanges. "Why does this work? How do you generate power without telegraphing?" His curiosity overcoming his pride. Chuck answered patiently, demonstrating principles rather than techniques, foundations rather than flourishes. Stallone and Seagal had established a similar dynamic, the actors' lifelong fascination with martial arts, finding expression in their increasingly collaborative demonstration. When Seagal executed a complex wrist lock that could have been painful, Stallone tapped in acknowledgement, then asked for the movement to be shown again, slower. As the final bell approached, Dana realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, not the circus she had feared, but a public reconciliation between appearance and reality, between showmanship and substance. The last minute unfolded as a genuine exhibition rather than a contest, all four men now working together to demonstrate different approaches to movement, power, and control. The crowd, initially disappointed by the lack of spectacular conflict, had grown attentive, then appreciative, then actively engaged in the unfolding lesson. When the final bell rang, there was no winner to announce, no victory to proclaim. Instead, all four men met at center ring, the traditional bow of respect between martial artists replacing the raised arms of a champion. Arnold spoke first, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "I have learned something tonight. Something important." The crowd hushed, camera flashes intensifying. "All my life, I have believed in being the strongest, the biggest, the most powerful." He placed a hand on Chuck's shoulder. "Tonight I discovered that true strength isn't about size or shows of force. It's about control, efficiency, and humility." The admission, unexpected and genuine, triggered a wave of applause that built slowly, then swelled to fill the entire arena. Not the frenzied cheering of bloodsport, but the deeper appreciation of witnessing authentic growth. Stallone nodded in agreement. "In my films, I've always tried to show that heart matters more than muscle. Tonight I was reminded that wisdom matters more than technique." "Thank you, Stephen." "Thank you, Chuck." The four men raised their hands together, the gesture erasing the divisions of competition and replacing them with mutual respect. The crowd rose in standing ovation not for victory or defeat, but for the rarer spectacle of pride yielding to wisdom. As they exited the platform, Dana watched from her booth. Her initial fears, replaced by a growing recognition. What could have been a disaster had instead become the most valuable kind of entertainment, the kind that leaves its audience not just amused, but enlightened. The Legends Arena had delivered on its promise after all, though not in the way anyone had anticipated. It had showcased true legends, not in their capacity to dominate, but in their willingness to grow. Even at 77, even at 84, the most important battles weren't fought against others, they were fought against oneself. The post-exhibition reception buzzed with an energy unlike anything Dana had experienced in 20 years of entertainment production. Instead of the typical after-party atmosphere, loud music, flowing champagne, performative camaraderie, the penthouse suite had assumed the atmosphere of an intimate seminar. Industry titans, celebrities, and athletes gathered in small clusters, their conversations hushed and focused. At the center of it all stood Chuck Norris and Seagal, surrounded by a rapt audience as they elaborated on principles demonstrated during the exhibition. Gone was the spectacle. In its place, a genuine exchange of knowledge. "Notice the position of the feet," Chuck was explaining, demonstrating a subtle weight shift that hardly seemed to move his body, yet completely changed his balance point. "Power doesn't begin in the arms, or even the torso. It starts from the ground up." The group watching included championship fighters, Hollywood stunt coordinators, and several young actors known for their action roles. All listening, with the focused attention of students, rather than the polite interest of celebrities. Seagal, typically reticent in public gatherings, had found his element as well. "Most fighting systems begin by teaching how to attack," he said to his own cluster of attentive listeners. "Aikido begins by teaching how to harmonize. Only when you understand harmony can you truly understand conflict." Dana circulated through the room, nursing a sparkling water, still processing the evening's unexpected turn. The exhibition had been broadcast globally, breaking viewership records across platforms. But the metrics that normally define success, audience size, social media engagement, revenue generation, seemed hollow measures of what had actually transpired. Quite a night. She turned to find Sylvester Stallone beside her. His expression thoughtful as he surveyed the room. The actor had changed into casual evening wear, but something more significant had altered in his demeanor. A weight lifted, a lesson integrated. Not what I expected, Dana admitted. The best lessons rarely are. Stallone sipped his drink. You know, I've spent 50 years playing fighters in movies. Surrounded myself with real champions. Absorbed their techniques, their stories, their mindset. Thought I understood it. He shook his head. Tonight showed me the gap between knowledge and wisdom. Where's Arnold? Dana asked, suddenly realizing the former governor's booming voice was conspicuously absent. Stallone's expression grew more complex. Taking a moment. This hit him differently. Across the room, in a quiet corner, partially concealed by decorative palms, Arnold Schwarzenegger sat alone, staring at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Las Vegas skyline sparkled beyond. But his focus remained inward. His legendary confidence, temporarily suspended in contemplation. He sensed, rather than heard, Chuck Norris approach. The martial artist moved with the same quiet efficiency in social settings as he did in combat. Mind if I join you? Chuck asked. Arnold gestured to the adjacent chair without speaking. For a moment, the two men sat in silence, both watching the reflection of the reception in the dark glass. I owe you an apology, Arnold said finally. Chuck shook his head. You owe yourself one, perhaps. The response brought a rueful smile to Arnold's face. Always the teacher. Always the student, Chuck corrected gently. That's the secret most miss. The moment you believe you've mastered something is the moment you stop growing in it. Arnold turned from the window, studying Chuck directly. In the dim light, age was more evident on both men, the lines deeper. The shoulders perhaps not quite as square as in their prime. But while Arnold wore his age as an opponent to be conquered, Chuck seemed to have incorporated it as simply another phase of development. You know, Arnold said, I've spent my life being the strongest person in the room. Bodybuilding, movies, politics, always projecting power, certainty, strength. It becomes your identity. The thing people expect. The thing you expect from yourself. Chuck nodded, understanding in his eyes. The image begins to own the man. Exactly. And tonight. Arnold's voice trailed off, the admission difficult for a man defined by confidence. Tonight, the image cracked a little. Chuck finished for him, and that feels like failure. Arnold's surprise was evident. How did you? I've walked this path longer than you have, Arnold. Faced the same challenges. The difference is that my training taught me from the beginning that strength without humility becomes weakness. Arnold considered this, turning his empty glass slowly between massive hands. In my world, showing weakness was unforgivable. You either dominated or were dominated. No middle ground. That's the illusion of ego, Chuck said. True strength exists precisely in the middle ground in balance, control, and the wisdom to know when to use power and when to withhold it. Something shifted in Arnold's expression, a subtle relaxation, the first indication of acceptance. 50 years of being the Terminator, he said with a self-deprecating smile. Hard habit to break. The question isn't whether to break it, Chuck replied. It's whether to expand beyond it. Your strength is real, Arnold. Your discipline, your drive, these aren't illusions. They just need to be balanced with awareness and humility. Arnold nodded slowly. The wisdom in Chuck's words penetrating layers of identity built over decades. I came here to prove something, he admitted. Instead, I learned something. Not sure which is more valuable. The latter, Chuck said simply. Always the latter. Across the reception, Steven Seagal had joined Dana and Stallone, the three watching the quiet conversation unfolding in the corner. Will he be okay? Dana asked. Better than okay, Seagal replied. Arnold is experiencing what every martial artist must face, eventually the recognition that true mastery begins with surrender of the ego. Sounds counterintuitive, Dana observed. Most profound truths are, Seagal said. The strongest tree in the storm isn't the one that stands rigid. It's the one that knows how to bend. Stallone nodded in agreement, his filmmaker's eye capturing the tableau across the room. Two icons from different worlds, finding common ground in the universal language of growth and self-discovery. You know, he said thoughtfully, I've made a career playing underdogs who triumph through heart and determination. Stories about ordinary men finding extraordinary strength. He gestured toward Chuck and Arnold. But maybe the more interesting story is about extraordinary men finding ordinary wisdom. Dana considered this. The producer in her already envisioning a different kind of project, not the spectacle she had originally planned, but something more nuanced, more authentic. Would audiences watch that? She wondered aloud. In a world obsessed with winners and losers, would people appreciate a story about transcending the very concept of winning? The right audience would, Stallone replied. The ones ready for the message. As the evening progressed, the four legends eventually converged at the center of the reception. What began as separate conversations merged into a unified exchange, boundaries dissolving as perspectives intermingled. Arnold and Stallone shared insights from their cinematic approaches to combat. Chuck and Seagal offered principles from their lifelong practice of martial arts. Those fortunate enough to witness the impromptu symposium observed something rare. Four men who had defined different aspects of strength for generations, now collectively redefining it before their eyes. Not as dominance or display, but as integration of opposing forces' power and restraint, confidence and humility, performance and authenticity. As midnight approached, the reception thinned. Guests departing with thoughtful expressions, rather than the exhilarated exhaustion typical of entertainment events. Dana found herself alone on the penthouse balcony. The cool desert air. A welcome relief after hours of intensity. Miss Voss. She turned to find all four legends approaching. A unity in their movement that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. Gentlemen, she acknowledged. I hope the evening met your expectations. Exceeded them, Chuck replied. Transformed them, Arnold amended, earning appreciative nods from the others. We've been talking, Stallone said, about the future of your arena. Dana raised an eyebrow. Curiosity piqued. Oh? What happened tonight wasn't just an exhibition, Seagal explained. It was a demonstration of principles that transcend entertainment principles, about authentic strength, about the relationship between appearance and essence. Principles worth sharing, Chuck added. Arnold stepped forward, his characteristic confidence now tempered with newfound humility. We're proposing a series, not competition's education. Each of us bringing our unique perspective. Movie fighting versus real martial arts. Showmanship versus substance. Not as opposition, but as complement. A dialogue across disciplines, Stallone elaborated. Something that honors both the spectacle of entertainment and the wisdom of tradition. Dana considered the proposition, her mind racing with possibilities. The Legends Arena had been conceived as a venue for display, for performance, for the external manifestation of strength. What they were suggesting represented a fundamental shift toward meaning, toward depth, toward the internal foundation upon which all true strength was built. It would be a risk, she said finally. Different from anything on the market. The greatest victories come from the greatest risks, Chuck replied. Another principle worth teaching. As the four men awaited her response, Dana gazed out at the Las Vegas skyline, a city built on illusion, suddenly hosting a discussion about authenticity. The irony wasn't lost on her. Tomorrow, she decided. Let's meet tomorrow and map out the framework. Tonight was just the beginning. The four legends nodded in synchrony, satisfaction evident in their expressions. As they turned to leave, Arnold paused, looking back at Dana with newfound clarity in his eyes. You know, he said, I came here believing strength was about imposing my will. I'm leaving understanding it's about transcending it. He smiled, not the camera-ready grin of his Hollywood years, but something more genuine. That's a plot twist even I didn't see coming. As they departed, Dana remained on the balcony, watching the lights of Las Vegas blur into a tapestry of color and possibility. The Legends Arena would indeed become a showcase of strength, but not the kind that roared for attention or demanded applause. Rather, the quiet strength that changed lives through example rather than exhibition. The strength that knew when to stand firm and when to yield. The strength that recognized learning as a lifelong process rather than a destination reached. The true strength of legends. Morning light spilled across the practice floor of the private dojo Chuck Norris had rented for the week. The space was deliberately austere, polished wood floors, plain white walls, and a small shrine at the front where a single candle burned. No logos, no sponsors, no distractions. Just space for movement and reflection. Chuck moved through his morning kata with the same precision he had demonstrated for 60 years. At 84, each position flowed into the next with harmonious continuity. Not the explosive power of youth, but something deeper, distilled through decades of consistent practice. Nearby, Steven Seagal sat in meditation, his breathing regulated and imperceptible. Though outwardly motionless, his awareness encompassed the entire room, a skill honed through years of Aikido training that taught presence as the foundation of all technique. The dojo door slid open. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone entered, dressed in simple workout clothes rather than the branded athletic wear they typically favored. They moved with a different quality than they had displayed 48 hours earlier, more mindful, less performative. As if the previous night's exhibition had initiated a recalibration of their relationship with their own bodies. Chuck completed his kata, bowing respectfully toward the shrine, before turning to acknowledge the newcomers. Right on time, he said with quiet approval. We said 7 o'clock, Arnold replied. In my life, discipline starts with punctuality. Chuck nodded, recognizing the truth in this statement. Despite their different paths, certain fundamentals united all four men, discipline chief among them. Before we begin, Stallone said, I wanted to thank you both. Last night could have gone very differently. It almost did, Seagal observed, opening his eyes and rising fluidly from his meditation posture. Ego is a powerful adversary. Tell me about it, Arnold agreed. A rueful smile acknowledging how close he had come to allowing pride to overwhelm wisdom. I've spent a lifetime feeding mine. We all have, in different ways, Chuck said. The difference isn't in having an ego or not having one. It's in whether you own your ego or it owns you. The four men moved to the center of the practice floor, forming a small circle. Outside, Las Vegas was already humming with activity, the ceaseless machinery of entertainment and commerce that defined the city. But within the dojo's simple walls, a different energy prevailed, contemplative, focused, authentic. So, Arnold said, his accent thick but his tone sincere, we are students today. And teachers, Chuck corrected gently. Each of us brings knowledge the others lack. Today is about exchange, not hierarchy. For the next 2 hours, the dojo became a laboratory of movement and philosophy. Chuck and Seagal demonstrated fundamental principles from their respective disciplines. Chuck's emphasis on efficient striking derived from his karate background, Seagal's focus on blending and redirecting central to Aikido. Arnold and Stallone, in turn, shared insights from their cinematic approaches: how to make movement read on camera, how to convey impact without injury, how to tell a story through physical action. What emerged wasn't a competition, but a collaboration, 4 different paths toward mastery finding unexpected convergence. As they worked, the initial awkwardness dissolved, replaced by the natural camaraderie of practitioners, united by common purpose, despite differing methods. The camera requires exaggeration, Stallone explained, demonstrating how a movie punch extends further than a real one. But the principle remains, the same power generating from the core, transferring through alignment. While real combat demands efficiency, Chuck added, showing how a genuine strike travels a shorter path. Different applications of the same foundation. By mid-morning, sweat glistened on all 4 men, evidence of engagement rather than performance. When they finally paused, seating themselves on the dojo floor, there was a palpable sense of barriers dissolved. "I've been thinking about last night," Arnold said, his voice uncharacteristically reflective. "About what it revealed." The others waited, giving him space to articulate his thoughts. "All my life, I've equated strength with dominance, being the biggest, the strongest, the most successful." He looked down at his hands, still powerful, but marked now with the lines of age. "But what I saw in both of you was something different. Strength as integration rather than imposition. The paradox of true power." Seagal nodded. "The more desperately you grasp for it, the more certainly it eludes you." A knock at the dojo door interrupted their conversation. Dana Voss entered, carrying a sleek portfolio and looking considerably more rested than she had the previous night. "Gentlemen," she greeted them, "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Perfect timing," Arnold assured her. "We were just philosophizing." Dana smiled, taking a seat at the edge of the practice area. "That's actually relevant to why I'm here." She opened the portfolio, revealing conceptual designs for a new project. Where the original Legends Arena promotional materials had emphasized spectacle, dramatic lighting, intense expressions, the visual language of confrontation, these new concepts suggested something entirely different. Harmony rather than opposition, wisdom rather than dominance. "After last night," she explained, "I couldn't stop thinking about what transpired. Not just the exhibition itself, but what it represented. The journey from ego to integration, from external validation to internal authenticity." She spread the materials before them. "I'm proposing a series called The Strength Beyond Strength. Not competitions, but conversations. Not about who's strongest, but about what strength truly means across different disciplines and life paths." The 4 men examined the concepts with varying expressions. Arnold with entrepreneurial assessment, Stallone with narrative appreciation, Chuck and Seagal with measured consideration of purpose and impact. "The first installment would feature the 4 of you," Dana continued. "But it would expand to include other voices. Athletes, philosophers, spiritual leaders, everyday heroes. All exploring the same fundamental question: what is genuine strength, and how do we cultivate it in a world obsessed with its external trappings?" Silence followed her presentation, each man processing the proposal through his unique lens of experience. "It's risky," Stallone observed finally. "Not the typical action content audiences expect from any of us. The greatest growth happens at the edge of comfort," Chuck countered. "For audiences as well as practitioners." Arnold studied the concept art, his expression thoughtful. "You know, when I came to America, I had one vision: to be the best, the biggest, the strongest. It was all external. Trophies, titles, box office numbers, votes. He looked up, meeting each man's gaze in turn. What if the next chapter is about something else? About legacy beyond achievement? About transmission rather than acquisition? Seagal nodded, passing forward wisdom rather than accumulating accolades. So, Dana said finally, are you in? The four legends exchanged glances, unspoken understanding passing between them. Chuck spoke first, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had defined his public persona for decades. On one condition, he stipulated, this can't be about personalities. It has to be about principles. Agreed, Dana said without hesitation. The focus is the message, not the messengers. Then I'm in, Chuck confirmed. As am I, Seagal added. Stallone nodded his assent. Count me in. All eyes turned to Arnold, who had fallen uncharacteristically quiet. The former governor sat with hands clasped, his expression contemplative. Arnold? Dana prompted gently. I'm thinking about something Chuck said yesterday. Arnold replied. 50 years of practice, not 50 years of pretending. He looked up, his gaze direct and stripped of its usual performative quality. I've spent my life being Arnold Schwarzenegger, the image, the brand, the legend. Maybe it's time to discover who I really am beneath all that. The vulnerability in his admission created a momentary stillness in the room. Four men and one woman, connected not by the usual currencies of Hollywood, but by the rarer commodity of authentic presence. That, Chuck said quietly, is where true strength begins. The afternoon sun filtered through the dojo's high windows, casting gentle light across the practice floor. As they finalized details for the new project, the conversation flowed with unexpected ease across formerly rigid boundaries. Arnold's entrepreneurial vision complemented Stallone's storytelling instincts. Chuck's pedagogical experience balanced Seagal's esoteric depth. Dana's production expertise unified these diverse elements into viable structure. What emerged was not just a concept for entertainment, but a framework for transformation. A bridge between the performative strength that had defined their careers and the authentic strength that would define their legacies. 3 months later, the Legends Arena hosted the premiere of Strength Beyond Strength. Not a competition, not a documentary, but a filmed symposium. The format was deceptively simple. 4 legends from different traditions sharing what they had learned about authentic power through decades of practice, performance, and personal evolution. The audience was unlike typical Las Vegas crowds. No rowdy bachelor parties or selfie-seeking tourists. Instead, the seats filled with practitioners from various disciplines, martial artists, actors, athletes, teachers, spiritual seekers, people drawn not by celebrity, but by the promise of genuine wisdom. Dana stood backstage, watching on a monitor as the 4 men seated themselves in a loose circle at center stage. No podiums, no special lighting, no dramatic introductions. Just 4 individuals prepared to speak authentically about the journey from ego to integration. Chuck began with characteristic simplicity. Strength isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. What followed was 2 hours of conversation that flowed with surprising depth and vulnerability. Arnold spoke candidly about the insecurity that had driven his relentless pursuit of physical perfection, his fear that without accolades and attention, he might cease to exist. Stallone reflected on how his most famous characters, Rocky and Rambo, represented different aspects of his own struggle with feeling underestimated and overlooked. Chuck shared how his early martial arts training had been motivated by fear rather than wisdom, the desire to never be vulnerable, to always be the most dangerous person in the room, and how that motivation had transformed through spiritual practice into something more balanced and compassionate. Seagal spoke of the paradox at the heart of Aikido, that true strength came not from resistance but from yielding, not from asserting the self, but from transcending it. The audience listened in rapt attention, witnessing not a performance but a revelation. Four men who had defined strength for generations, now redefining it before their eyes. When questions came, they weren't about movie stunts or championship fights. They addressed fundamental human concerns. How do you build confidence without feeding ego? How do you remain humble without diminishing your gifts? How do you age with grace in a culture obsessed with youth and physical prowess? The answers revealed not gurus with perfect wisdom, but fellow travelers on the path, men who had achieved extraordinary external success while still wrestling with the same internal challenges common to all humanity. As the evening concluded, Dana watched from the wings, aware that she was witnessing something rare in entertainment, not escapism, but engagement with life's deepest questions, not distraction from reality, but immersion in it. The four legends rose together, acknowledging the standing ovation not with the practiced wave of celebrities, but with the simple bow of students who recognize that the journey never ends. The learning never ceases. Backstage, as they gathered their belongings and prepared to depart, a moment of quiet acknowledgement passed between them. No grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, just the silent recognition of a circle completed. What had begun as a challenge rooted in ego had transformed into a collaboration founded on mutual respect. "Well," Arnold said finally, "that was not what I expected 3 months ago." "Life rarely is," Chuck replied with a slight smile. "The question," Seagal added, "is whether we fight the unexpected or flow with it. And whether we learn from it," Stallone concluded. As they parted ways, each returning to his respective world, his respective path, something essential remained connected. Not friendship in the conventional sense, but a deeper recognition of shared humanity beneath surface differences. Dana remained behind, surveying the now empty arena. What had been conceived as a temple to spectacle had revealed itself as something more profound. A space where authentic dialogue could flourish, where wisdom could be transmitted, where strength could be redefined. In the quiet aftermath, she realized that the most valuable transformations often happened not in moments of glory or triumph, but in the silence that followed, when the noise of ego subsided and the quiet voice of truth could finally be heard. The true strength of legends wasn't in their capacity to dominate, but in their willingness to evolve, to move beyond the personas that had defined them, to embrace the wisdom that transcended them, and to share that journey with others still finding their way. In the end, it wasn't about who was strongest. It was about understanding what strength really meant. And in that understanding, all became stronger. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.